What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I am your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. It feels so incredibly good to be saying that once again. It feels like forever since I have been on. Welcome back. I am happy to be back. Before we get into everything, I just want to say a huge thank you to the people who filled in for me while I was out for the last week, while I was in LA and Las Vegas. Jacob Westendorf especially, who filled in multiple episodes, did such a tremendous job, as did everybody. Andrew Merteg, who filled in a couple episodes. Maggie Loney, Kyle Fellows, Nick Schmitz, Gage Bridgeford, Mike Wentland, Owen Reese. I appreciate you all so incredibly much. It is so amazing to have such an incredible group of people who help me 365 days a year with the audio podcast, but who are also willing to pitch in and do video episodes as well when needed. It's such an amazing group of people, and I cannot thank them enough, and especially those who were able to help out over the past week. Hopefully you got to know them a little bit better. They're amazing Packers content creators. Please go out and follow them all on Twitter. Again, they are incredible, and I cannot thank them enough for covering for me while I was out. But in case you didn't know, we had an NFL draft while I was away. I had the opportunity to attend in Vegas, which was cool, but let me just tell you, you don't really need to attend an NFL draft in person. It's cool, but there's only so much that's going to happen on a stage of people announcing draft picks, which you can sort of expect, but seeing it once in your life and being able to experience the entire event was absolutely amazing. So no question there, but again, I'm going to just say it for the sake of saying it. I'm so happy to be back and doing this once again and talking to you guys. So let's go. If you're looking today for like deep dives into all these players, I don't think that does anyone any good, because we're going to go over kind of the overall draft today, my overall thoughts. We'll get to each of those really deep dives. I'm going to be watching a lot of all 22 film on all these players, and we will get to exactly what I'm seeing on those all 22 videos. We've received our presents now from Brian Gutekunst. We still have to sort of unwrap and dive into each of them. That will be coming in the coming weeks. There are videos out there that I did prior to the draft that are including, deep dives about Christian Watson, about Davonte Wyatt, and about Quay Walker as well. So if you haven't checked those out yet, those are out there. A couple of the videos have some other players in them, but you can kind of fast forward and skip through that. So some of that information is already out there, but I will be going through deep dives of all of these players in the next few weeks. But let's start off by just kind of going over my general thoughts on how Brian Gutekunst navigated this draft. A semi-polarizing draft from a punditry standpoint. I've seen a lot of people that have ranked this draft very, very well for Green Bay. I've seen people even like Dane Brugler from The Athletic, who I really like a lot. I think had him as like their 27th-ish draft class. So some real polarizing thoughts on this draft. Interestingly enough, it seems for the most part, at least on Twitter, that most Packer fans are very satisfied with the draft, which just never usually happens. Usually there's a lot of complaints. There were certainly a decent amount of complaints, I think, following the first round, but it felt like once everything really came together and people had a chance to see the full puzzle and all the pieces filled in, they started to really like it quite a bit. So it's interesting. I think there's a lot to unpack here of what Green Bay was ultimately able to accomplish. And I really break this down into three different portions of the draft. I think you have your first and second rounds where they ultimately got three players, then your middle rounds from Sean Ryan to Kingsley Enagbare, and then your seventh round picks and even an undrafted free agent that I'm going to touch on a little bit here. But those to me are the three different levels of the draft. So let's talk about level one: Quay Walker, Davonte Wyatt, and Christian Watson, because that is ultimately what this draft will be really graded on, is how those three picks perform. 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks that you ultimately turned into a Georgia linebacker, Georgia defensive lineman, and a wide receiver out of North Dakota State. All three of these picks are intriguing for a variety of different reasons. All three of them have some version of real Packer pick in them, like you could see it coming. All three of them have some reason why you thought maybe Green Bay wouldn't go in that direction. So let's start with Quay Walker. And if you remember when we went over Walker, and even more recently when I did the mock draft, I said the more and more I thought about it, the more and more Quay Walker felt like such a Green Bay Packer pick. There's one very specific way that he did not feel like a Green Bay Packer pick, and that was the fact that he was an off-ball linebacker. And Green Bay has not valued this position. really for some time, really since AJ Hawk, basically. They haven't spent money at the position. They haven't drafted high players at this position. The only resource that they put into it was Devondre Campbell recently, this year, where they gave him a big extension. And the thought process pre-draft for me, even though I had Quay Walker as one of my players that I thought Green Bay would very much consider with their first round picks, the thought process going through my head is, this is a position they haven't valued almost at all. In the same offseason, are we going to see them go and spend a lot of money to re-sign Devondre Campbell and spend a first-round pick on a off-ball linebacker? Well, the resounding answer is yes, because they didn't even wait till pick 28 to maybe see if Walker was still there. They used pick 22 on Quay Walker. Now, why everything else seemed very much like a Green Bay Packer sort of pick, young, ultra-athletic, traits over tape, like this screams, and then versatility, probably could play some edge in a pinch, pass rush, off-ball linebacker, etc. It just screamed Green Bay Packer pick for all of those reasons. And this is sort of classic Green Bay, where everyone's expecting you to take like a Nakobe Dean at linebacker if you're going to take a linebacker from Georgia, and they take a Quay Walker. And of course, Nakobe Dean ends up going in the third round. Green Bay gets Walker at pick 22. But what if you're still wondering, why would Green Bay take a Quay Walker sort of player at pick 22? There's a couple different reasons. First of all, it is very clear, even going back to last season, that Green Bay valued their nickel defense with two linebackers. Chris Barnes played over 50% of the snaps. They tried to play some different players like Henry Black at times in that box safety, like hybrid linebacker role. I guarantee you if they had two really good linebackers, I think they probably would have played that nickel style defense on maybe 75% more of their snaps. And they just didn't have that guy. So you might say, how often is a second linebacker going to play? And is this going to be a major player? Is he going to be a starter? My answer is a resounding yes. I wholeheartedly expect us to see a lot of Devondre Campbell and a lot of Quay Walker next to each other in a ton of nickel defense. I expect a lot of it. I expect that, I don't think it's impossible, even if Devondre Campbell is healthy for every snap this season, I don't think it's impossible that Quay Walker could get to about 70 snaps, even as a rookie at pick 22. I think that's what they think about him. Now, the other thing here is if you're wondering, all right, why Quay Walker? Well, again, we touched base on some of the physical traits and what he could potentially bring to the table. Super athletic player. When you're looking at an off-ball linebacker, I talked about safeties a lot in my run-up to the draft of like, all right, what can they do? If they can, play a true single high and, go sideline to sideline and fill the gaps, that's a highly valuable player. If they can cover a wide receiver, tight end, running back, that's extremely valuable. Well, what do you want from an off-ball linebacker? You certainly want, incredible tackling ability, the ability to get sideline to sideline, the ability to take on a guard or a center in space, shed the block and go make a play. You want the ability to maybe cover tight ends or running backs. You want the ability to blitz. You want the ability to spy. You want the ability to drop back in zone coverage. Again, maybe flash to the flat. You want the ability to do all those sort of things. If Quay Walker hits, he can do all of it. And there are not many linebackers in the NFL that can say that. There's always going to be some sort of deficiency with most linebackers just because all of those things combined are very hard to do. And Green Bay potentially found somebody who can do all of that, who can get sideline to sideline, who can stack a guard or center and shed and go make a play, who can cover in man, who can cover in zone, who can blitz, who can maybe even play a little bit off the edge. He can do all of those things if he reaches his ceiling. Now, the question mark, of course, is why wasn't he more of an impact player at Georgia? You go back to my video pre-draft and I said, this is a player that has the ability to be as good as he wants, but when you're taking somebody ideally in the, let's say top 22 picks, you want to see them flash as the guy, right? And you go and watch Georgia and you're watching all of these incredible players, and more often than not, you're mentioning a lot of the other players on that defense before you mention Quay Walker. He was a good player that did a lot of things really well, but he was never the star on that defense. Now, what Green Bay's banking on is that he's so young still that, like, let's say he would have went back to Georgia. If he goes back to Georgia, he might be the true star on that defense. And he might be the guy, and all of a sudden he might end up with 110 tackles and 6 sacks and 3 or 4 interceptions. And now he's going, I don't know, maybe with that athletic profile, now with matching it with production, he's probably going top 15, top 12 potentially. So Green Bay's saying he has all the traits, which is a very Green Bay thing. Maybe the tape hasn't come along quite exactly where we want it to be yet, but he has everything that we look for in a linebacker. He is very much, like I said, he's a scout. Like I've said, I use this terminology. I forget which player. Maybe it was Walker. Who knows? But like he's a scout's wet dream. Like he's exactly what you want: size, speed, athletic ability at linebacker. You just didn't always see him be the guy. You just didn't always see him really be the impact player. And if you're picking a guy at pick 22, you're hoping they can become that impact player. Now, this is not that different than Rashaan Gary, right? Rashawn Gary, what I originally did not like the Rashaan Gary pick is because if you're picking at pick 12, I want almost every single one of those boxes checked of what you can bring to the table. And Gary had 2 that he didn't check. A, he had the poor shoulder, so he already had an injury issue. And then 2, he didn't have that high level of production. You were projecting what he was going to become, which is the job of a scout and a general manager, by the way. But you were projecting what he was ultimately going to become rather than saying like, he's already there. Now, Rashaan Gary's turned out incredibly well after a couple seasons. Quay Walker has that same type of ability and traits without maybe having the high-end tape. Now, like Rashaan Gary, Quay Walker has some flash plays on tape that will make you stop and go, wow. That's why he's in that spot. And I do think he can come along and be a much more consistent player. I think pairing him with Devondre Campbell is a beautiful pairing. I think they can play off each other incredibly well. I think it's going to make Joe Barry's job so much easier. I think we've seen since Joe Barry's come along a much more emphasized inside linebacker position, and he also seems to get the most out of those type of players. I like this fit. Now, we'll get to the value of that inside linebacker position more in just a moment, but I can see a lot of what Green Bay liked in that pick. Probably not exactly what I maybe would have done in that same situation, but I get it and I understand it, and I in no way, shape, or form dislike the pick because I think he fits in really well with this Green Bay defense, and he adds another layer of speed and physicality to a defense that is just seemingly getting faster and more physical. And again, love the pairing with Campbell. As far as like comp, I've seen some people say like, all right, this could be a really, really high level player, maybe like a Micah Parsons. Like that's the name that gets thrown out there, right? I don't see Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons is an alien. Like he is a freak. There just you're not going to find a lot of Micah Parsons ever. Like he's just an absolute freak. So I don't think he's that. I do think he has a lot of similarities to Devondre Campbell. I do think he can maybe do a better job as a blitzer and do some of those things that Micah Parsons does at an insane level. I think he can be like maybe like a B- version of that. But somewhere between a Devondre Campbell and Micah Parsons, more towards the Devondre Campbell side, those are the type of traits and that's the type of player he has the ability to become. And I'm talking high-level All-Pro last season Devondre Campbell. You get a Pro Bowl / All-Pro caliber player inside linebacker, yeah, you're willing to take that at pick 22. That's what Green Bay is banking on at that position. That brings us to Davonte Wyatt. Davonte Wyatt loved a lot of the same things from an athletic standpoint, right? The fastest way to get to the quarterback is, from the interior of the defensive line where you can make a quick move and penetrate into the backfield. Same thing with a running back. And Davonte Wyatt has that in spades. He has the ability to quickly penetrate and be a disruptor, a true disruptor, and a quick disruptor. That is something that Green Bay has not had in the middle of their defense outside over the last couple of years when Zadarius Smith, really in 2019 when he played over center towards the end of the season and would just have some immediate wins. Kenny Clark will win every once in a while with quickness, but more often it's like a power move and it's going to be a little bit more of a slow burn, right? Dean Lowry is going to be power. Tyler Lancaster, if he won, was going to be more methodical. Like even Jerron Reed and the guys that the other guys that they brought in, TJ Slayton, like these are going to be more players that are going to take a little bit more time to get there. They don't have that flavor in Davonte Wyatt before drafting Davonte Wyatt. He can be that quick penetrating player. And again, this is the joy and amazingness of Kenny Clark is that if they wanted Kenny Clark to be more of the three technique and bring in more of a nose tackle, they could have done that. But now Kenny Clark moves over, plays more of he's still going to be the center of that defense, and he's still going to be the guy that's plugging the gaps and is going to win up the field and still penetrate. But now they've got the guy that can shoot the gaps and be more of a penetrator while still holding up his end of the bargain. And guess what? Wyatt and Reed and Clark and Slayton and this entire defensive line group that's going to be able to rotate very heavily, that's going to make the jobs easier for Devondre Campbell and, of course, Quay Walker. So I like how these picks fit together. You're adding 2 Georgia players with speed and toughness and physicality and the ability to win by penetrating upfield and just being insanely ridiculous high-level athletes. That's going to add a lot to your defense, and it's going to help Joe Barry really put, I think, one of the best defenses in the league on the field if everyone can stay healthy. So really excited about both of those picks. We get to the end of the first, and you have 2 defensive players from Georgia, a defensive tackle and a inside linebacker. I don't think that's maybe what a lot of people expected, but I think it was really good value based on what the board was at that time. We'll talk about that value more in just a moment. Then Green Bay trades their 2 second-round picks up to get Christian Watson, and this is also, I should go back to Wyatt for just a second. He hit all of the things that Green Bay normally looks for, except age. He's 24 years old, so he's a little bit overaged at the position, but with 5 years on the deal, Green Bay's going to get him 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. They're going to get him in the prime of his career and then be able to make a decision if they want to extend him after that. So not super concerned about the age, and he should be able to be somebody that comes in and contributes right away. Christian Watson, again, he has all of the physical traits that you would want to look for. He's a blocker on the outside. He fits the system. Just didn't have a lot of the production, right? That's the one thing that made you kind of question, all right, would they go in this direction? Didn't play against a top-tier school this past season. But as I mentioned on my video on Watson, if every receiver in this draft hits their highest ceiling, to me, Christian Watson ends up being the best receiver in the draft. Like, that's the type of athletic profile and player that he is. I like his block. I love his blocking and intensity on the outside. I love that he can be used in a variety of different ways. He's got great speed. He's got great size. He has the ability to high point the ball. It's just going to learn how to be an NFL wide receiver. And guess who needs to learn how to become an NFL wide receiver? Literally every single one of these wide receivers. It just is what it is. Now, Chris Olave and some of these guys are a little bit more, even Garrett Wilson, more nuanced as route runners at this point. That's fine. That's fair. But every single one of these receivers are going to have to change things about their releases, about how they run routes, about how they attack defensive backs. They're going to have to get a PhD in how to become a wide receiver. And that's something I think Christian Watson's going to be able to do. If he does, the sky's the limit, sincerely. And Green Bay could walk out of this draft with one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in this draft. Giving up, 2 second-round picks is a steep price to pay, which we'll go over in just a moment. But I like the pick, and I'm really excited to see what he can bring to Green Bay. He's got some kick return ability. So, again, we'll deep dive him in just a bit, a few days this week. But I really like the player that they're able to get. And all of a sudden, again, they're adding Quay Walker, Davonte Wyatt, Christian Watson. They had the 4 picks. They turned it into 3 by moving the 2 seconds. But tough not to be excited about the 3 players that Green Bay got and the size, speed, strength, physicality, athletic attributes. Green Bay added some dudes in those 3 picks, and it doesn't mean they're going to pay off, but the opportunity to pay off because of the situations that they're going to be put in, as well as their athletic traits. I really like what Brian Gutekunst was able to do in navigating those 3 picks, and I like all 3 players. I don't think there's any one of those players where I'm like, I was screaming for on the clock, like it has to be this guy. But I don't think there's none of the 3 either that Packers drafted. I'm like, oh, they got that guy, right? I think these are 3 very good football players, and it's going to be up to the Packers and the coaching staff and these 3 players as to whether or not they can reach their ceilings. And if they do, look the heck out, because I think these 3 players are tremendously talented. Then we get into the second phase, and that to me is round 3 through round 5. They get Sean Ryan, Romeo Doubs. Yes, Dobbs. It has been pronounced every way. Doobs, Dubs, Dobbs. You hear him say it. He did an interview. He said it himself, Dobbs. The Packers released the phonetic pronunciation, Dobbs. So he said he was okay with Dubs because it sounded cooler. It's not Doobs, although Doobs would be cool to cheer. It is Dobbs. So Romeo Dobbs, Zach Tom, which is a much easier name, and then Kingsley Enagbare. To me, this is the group that the first group is like, you're going to get good players at that point, and you better hit on those guys. This is the group that's so intriguing to me because I like all 4 of these players quite a bit. I think Sean Ryan's going to get a real chance to win the right tackle job, and it would not surprise me if he won it. Now, I'm hesitant to say that because the Packers fail at literally every one of their third-round picks, it seems. But I'm hoping Sean Ryan can buck the trend a little bit and become the guy that really is a true potential, maybe starter. And we'll see if he gets that opportunity. I think he's going to have the opportunity. Now, I do think he ends up as a better guard in the NFL at some point, but wouldn't shock me at all if, by end of season, you were looking at Bakhtiari, John Runyon, Josh Myers, Sean Ryan, and Elton Jenkins anchoring a really strong offensive line. But we'll talk about Tom and Ryan here. Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, that's a lot of guy first names, but Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, I think these guys add more of that versatility, best five guys out on the line. And I think that's what's so exciting. I think they're, both of them are great athletes, although Sean Ryan didn't always show it on tape. Have the flexibility and versatility to play a variety of positions. And I think the competition is about to heat up and be really great all along that offensive line. So I think Ryan and Tom both end up as guards, but Tom could play some center. I'm just really excited to see the competition. And of course, Adam Stenovich is going to get some really young clay to play with there and try to mold these players into starting caliber players. Of course, Green Bay still has Yosh Nijman and Royce Newman, John Runyon Jr., Josh Myers, even Jake Hansen. I think the depth along the offensive line, and then we'll talk about Rasheed Walker in a second here too, but I think the depth got a lot better, and even potentially some starting caliber players. You could tell me a variety of almost anyone starting at right tackle. You could tell me Sean Ryan, you could tell me Zach Tom, you could even tell me Rasheed Walker, you could tell me Yosh Nijman, you could even talk me into Royce Newman. There's at least five guys that if you told me we're starting at right tackle week one, I wouldn't be super shocked with. So we'll see what happens, but I really like the two offensive linemen. Romeo Doubs, to me, was a much better technician than I think he got credit for. He was consistently taking the top off of defenses, was one of the fastest track players at the Senior Bowl. Just overall, really fun player. I'm always hesitant to get a little too excited over wide receivers because when you draft a wide receiver in this stage of the draft, I go back to Jamon Moore, right? Jamon Moore, even Equinemius St. Brown. These are players that everyone was geeking out over that Green Bay was able to get, myself included when it came to Jamon Moore. It's just such a different league in the NFL, and you have to be such a artist at the position and such a technician. But I think Romeo Doubs has that. I think he has some of those technical abilities. He's shown off some skills as a returner. I think he could be a punt returner for Green Bay. I think there's a player that is super intriguing. Doesn't mean he's going to hit, but I like the upside here. I love the play, and I thought at this point he was arguably the best player on the board and just a genius pick for Green Bay. And then same thing for Kingsley Enagbare. If you don't get your first Kingsley right, go with another one. Kingsley Kiki didn't pan out. Hopefully Kingsley Enagbare will be much better. But there's a little mini Zadarius Smith, and he's even wearing number 55 with how he wins. He lines up all over the defensive front, defensive tackle, over the center, standing up, edge rusher. His game still needs to develop. He needs to develop even more pass rush moves and counters, but you'll see him win with his hands. You'll see him win with counters. You'll see him win over center, outside. You'll see him win everywhere. There's a lot to love about this pick, and how I view the middle of this draft is it was value picks, right? Sean Ryan, potential starter at tackle or guard. Romeo Doubs, potential long-term wide receiver, maybe even somebody who can help from day one. Zach Tom, potential long-term starter along the offensive line. Kingsley Enagbare, a potential starter down the line at edge rusher, just great value as a rotational player. This to me was the meat and potatoes of the draft, where Brian Gutekunst really needed to hit on some things here. I think he did. They're not going to hit on all of them. Some of these guys are going to fail and flail out of the league or whatever. But overall, I thought that middle of the draft was really where Brian Gutekunst made his money this weekend. We'll see how it turns out, but those four in particular, the positions they got, the value they got, the players they got, the athleticism they got, I thought that four was really a masterclass in the middle of the draft. And then you get to the end of the draft, and what you're looking for at the end of the draft is one thing. Either one special trait or one thing that maybe they could bring to the team that maybe you don't have right now. You're looking for that one thing, and hopefully they can, start with that one thing and then expand their game, or they can be just a specialist at something, right? Tariq Carpenter, Green Bay's looking for that hybrid safety linebacker, right? Maybe they have it in Vernon Scott. but we don't really know. And Amos can play it a bit, but they want to keep Amos back at safety. Now you get a guy that can play maybe a little hybrid linebacker safety, but more importantly, this is your special teams guy. This is a guy that I guarantee you they're counting on to come in and be an enforcer on special teams. The size, the speed, the strength that he has, his run and tackle ability, this is their special teams ace that they're hoping can develop as a special teams stud. And in the meantime, he can work on whether he's going to be a linebacker, safety, somewhere in the middle, what he's going to play and work on those skills on defense. But I guarantee you this is a special teams pick. Jonathan Ford, this is a run stuffer, right? They've got some guys who can penetrate. They got some guys that can get upfield, but you can never have enough guys on early downs. Tyler Lancaster is gone. Jack Heflin, we'll see. This is a guy that has the ability to just be a true nose tackle and be somebody that's hard to move. The tape is not great, and we'll go over that more as time goes on, but you look at his size and physicality, you're hoping this can be somebody that can come in and be that Tyler Lancaster that's just, he's probably not going to win in the pass game, but can he do something well? If he can be a really good run defender, even as a 6th, 7th defensive lineman, whatever that is, that can add value to their team. That's what Green Bay's looking for here. Rasheed Walker is just, at this point, too good of a value to pass up, right? I mean, he's starting offensive tackle at Penn State, had some really big key matchups with, Aiden Hutchinson and, some really big Big Ten edge rushers, and held up well at times. And a lot of people had him in top 100 or close to it. And, he ends up, Green Bay gets him in the 7th round. I just think the value was way too good. And that's what they're looking for there. They're looking for value. And then Samori Toure, excuse me, this is a player who is a gunner on special teams and did that very well and can also be a developmental wide receiver. But gunner on special teams is probably where he's going to have to make his name, first of all, while also showing off what he can do at wide receiver. They're hoping that he can maybe be an upgrade for, say a Malik Taylor. And he'll have the opportunity to go out and prove that in camp. So first rounds, love the high-end upside they get in Quay Walker, Davonte Wyatt, and Christian Watson. The meat and potatoes, the Sean Ryan, the Romeo Dobbs, it's going to be so hard. Zach Tom, Kingsley Enagbare. I thought they really hit a ton of value in the middle of the draft. And then I feel like they got players that bring something to the table that they can hopefully develop or see what they have once they get those 7th round picks. If you can hit on one of those 4 guys, you're doing well, right? So we'll see what happens there. But overall, I loved it. And then Tyler Goodson, getting him as an undrafted free agent. This is a player I really liked in this draft. I thought he was well undervalued. When I started looking at the running backs in this draft, I just could never figure out exactly why Tyler Goodson wasn't somebody that had more value in this draft. But he's a perfect fit within this offense. He's going to have to work. Kylan Hill probably ends up on the PUP list to start the season. He's going to have to work to beat out a Patrick Taylor as the number 3, but I don't think that's totally out of the realm of possibility. So Goodson is a really nice pickup as an undrafted free agent. Now, Paul Noonan from Acme Packing Company had a great article that he put out about the process of the draft. And when you want, everyone can have a draft grade, right? Nobody freaking knows. The Packers don't know. The scouts don't know. 5 to 10 of these guys are going to end up being like all pro players. There's another group that are going to be really good starters, but the majority of this draft is going to bust out of the league in 3 to 4 years, and that just is what it is. You're hoping to hit on 2 to 3 guys from every draft class that can come in and really help you win. But Paul, makes a really great argument that it's tough to grade the players at this point, but you can absolutely grade the process. And I think there are some people that are maybe a little bit upset with some of the process evaluations that Green Bay used. I'm not really one of them. I get what Green Bay did. I get why they did it. And to me, this was a bizarre draft that didn't have a lot of the top end talent. So as far as the first round picks go, you could make a strong argument. Off-ball linebacker is not going to be your biggest need, want, desire in that situation using a number 22 pick. And there are guys on the board like a Jermaine Johnson or a George Karlaftis who play premium positions at a position that you really could use more depth at. And you can make a strong argument that there is much better value using it on a potentially top-tier edge rusher than a potential top-tier off-ball linebacker. Where even if you get a great linebacker, it may not be as valuable as a really good edge rusher. And if either Karlaftis or Jermaine Johnson turn out great, even if Quay Walker turns out great, the other guys are better because they're edge rushers and just have more value. Now, at the end of the day, draft good players. Like, if you can get really good football players, and I think Quay Walker has the ability to be that, I don't mind it. But from a value standpoint, you can make a strong argument that off-ball linebacker is the least valuable position on defense, maybe outside of nose tackle, right? I would say safety is in that realm as well, but like corner, edge rusher, defensive lineman who can get upfield, like all of those have more value. And then you start talking safety, inside linebacker, etc. And then again, you just spent a huge contract on Devondre Campbell as well. So I think you can question some of the value on that pick. And then, Davonte Wyatt, again, same thing. Not to the same extent, just an over age, but, you've got a George Karlaftis still there at that point. Does the edge rusher take a little bit of precedence? Again, I'm not as concerned about that. The only thing with Wyatt is age. But again, you can talk about value a little bit there. And if Green Bay got the best value possible out of those two picks, again, if they like the players more, trust your process, trust your board. But from a value standpoint, you can make the argument that, a 24-year-old defensive lineman and an off-ball linebacker doesn't potentially bring you the most value. Now, at wide receiver, Christian Watson really liked the player, but you can make a strong argument that picks 53 and 59 are not worth just pick 34, that Green Bay should have been able to get something in return for that. Clearly, they paid a premium to trade with a division rival with Minnesota and paid a premium to go up and get the wide receiver that they wanted. And I don't disagree with that. I don't hate that, but you can make a strong argument. Now, I want to be clear here, right? Green Bay doesn't know what's going to happen throughout the draft. So for all Green Bay knows, pick 34 is going to be Christian Watson. Pick 35 is going to be Alec Pierce. Pick 36 is going to be Sky Moore. Pick 37 is going to be Jalen Tolbert. And that run on wide receivers in the first round that we saw is the same thing that happens in the second round with the next batch of wide receivers. So Green Bay is trying to say, we're going to go up and we're just going to get our guy. And I totally respect that and get that. So, but you could make an argument, guess who got picks at pick 53? Yes, my guy, Alec Pierce. Sky Moore was right after that. Trey McBride, the tight end, was right after that. And then pick 59, some really good defenders, Drake Jackson, Nick Bonito, and Travis Jones. So if you were to stand here today and say, hey, would you rather have Christian Watson or would you rather have Alec Pierce and Drake Jackson? I'd probably rather take Drake Jackson and Alec Pierce just because I get more bites at the apple. Or a Trey McBride and a Travis Jones. That doesn't sound so bad either. So the value they gave up was tremendous to go get Christian Watson. But to me, they got that next best guy at wide receiver. To me, he had more value than Pickens because of some of the questions with Pickens. And then I do think he was a step above Alec Pierce as well. Now, again, if right now I had the ability to trade Watson for maybe Pearson, I don't know, let's say either Drake Jackson or Travis Jones, I'd probably take that deal. But again, hindsight's 2020. Green Bay doesn't know who's actually going to be there at those two picks. They valued Watson. They went and got him, and I don't hate that. I like that they got their guy. And for all the talk of at pick 22, Green Bay's got to get a receiver. Green Bay's got to get a receiver. From pick 22 up until pick 34, and in fact, over the next 20 picks, the only wide receiver that was selected from 22 over the next 20 picks was Christian Watson by the Green Bay Packers. So, yeah, they could have picked him at 22, I guess. But then you get Watson at 22, probably Davonte Wyatt at 28. And then now, I guess you still have your 2 seconds or whatever. But, they got a much better value by getting the two guys they wanted in the first round and still getting the next best receiver they wanted by trading up in the second round. So I thought overall it was a steep price to pay. But rather than spending, pick 22 or pick 28 on that wide receiver, using the 2 seconds to get the wide receiver while still picking up two guys in the first round, I thought that was pretty savvy by Brian Gutekunst. So from a position standpoint, it was really tough to predict what Green Bay was going to do, right? I did not in any way, shape, or form see defensive linebacker and linebacker out of the gate. Just didn't think that was going to be the direction that they went. All of a sudden, they give up their 2 second-round picks for Watson, and you go, you're out of first and second round picks and you still haven't addressed offensive linemen, edge, safety, etc. So your top 100 picks are now dwindling a little bit. You've only got one left and it's a late third, and you haven't taken an offensive lineman, you haven't taken an edge rusher, you haven't taken a safety. Now, I thought they did a really good job again in that middle part of the draft, going offensive lineman, wide receiver, offensive lineman, edge, and finding really good players at those positions. They built the depth on their offensive line with Ryan and Tom, and then again later with Rasheed Walker. They got another wide receiver to, again, aid in this offense and trying to find some playmakers. And then they finally got their edge rusher, which to me, Enigbare could have been a third, fourth round pick, and what to shock me, they get him, I think, in the fifth? I think it was the fifth, yeah. So overall, like what they did there, but it was tough to see them get through those first 3 picks without an offensive lineman, especially in edge, but I thought they recovered well from it, to be honest. So those are sort of my just overarching thoughts on the draft. I like how Brian Gutekunst navigated it. Love the middle. I thought the end, proved its point of find something with each player. And then there's just top end ability with those first 3 picks. Ideally, in a great draft, you're hoping to find, two of those 3 guys, the high end players, Walker, Wyatt, Watson, the 3 W's, hoping 2 of those 3 guys pan out really well. You hope you hit on one of those guys in the middle. And then in the 7th round, if you can find a decent player, one rotational player, near starter or special teams ace out of those 4, you've done your job as a GM. So we'll see what comes out of this draft. This is just the start of the process. All of these players have a long way to go, but again, I thought Brian Gutekunst did a nice job navigating it. A couple plays here or there that he made that maybe I don't fully agree with, but time will tell. And I left the draft feeling like, Brian Gutekunst addressed a lot of the needs on this team and did a good job finding high-end value players in the first 3 picks, and then really, solid supporting players with high upside that fell in the draft for some reason in the middle. And then again, guys with some specific traits at the end. So it's exactly how you should navigate it. Love the Tyler Goodson undrafted free agent pickup. The 2 positions that I feel like still really need some potential love are edge rusher and really defensive back. So with edge rusher, they've got Gary, they've got Preston, they've got Enigbare, you've got a Jonathan Garvin, a Tipa Nalai, Randy Ramsey, etc. I just feel like they could use that one more guy, maybe like a Jerry Hughes, somebody like that they could bring in as a veteran, somebody that fills that Whitney Merciless role. You get that, and I feel pretty good. If you would get, if you got Gary and Preston, and then a vet backup, and then Enigbare, and then probably either like a Randy Ramsey as a special teams guy or a Tipa Nalai as a special teams guy, I feel pretty good about that group, but I feel like they're missing that one piece still. And then defensive backfield, right? It's interesting to me. If you look at it, they basically have 5 guys that they trust. Jair, Stokes, Douglas at corner, Amos, Savage at safety. There's nobody else you trust. Where are you going to go? Sean Davis, Vernon Scott, Shamar Jean-Charles? There's just nobody else you trust at this point. So I feel like they could use a little bit more depth and versatility in the defensive backfield as well. We'll see if Green Bay adds at either of those positions. But overall, I thought a really nice job by Brian Gutekunst in a unique and at times difficult draft. He had a lot of capital, so you got to pay that off. We'll see how that trade ends up moving up 2 big picks for Christian Watson. But overall, I think tough to be disappointed with the direction that Brian Gutekunst did in this draft. I'll give my final grade once I finalize breaking down all these players. Hopefully tomorrow, if everything goes according to plan, we will do a deep dive into Quay Walker and then Davonte Wyatt and Christian Watson and so on and so forth. So that's going to do it for me today. So great being back. Thank you for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.